Well, welcome to Tipping Spears with Hannah Becker. Today's conversation promises to be an insightful one with remarkable guests. Whether you're joining us for the first time or you're a regular listener, we're so glad you're here. Our goal is to bring you closer to the innovative leaders and thinkers shaping our future. And today we are thrilled to welcome Dr. Daniel Ragsdale. Dr. Ragsdale blends decades of military service, technical expertise, and strategic foresight to help safeguard our nation in the digital age. A retired U.S. Army colonel with deployments to Grenada, Iraq, and Afghanistan, he has logged over 41 years of federal service, bringing his people-focused leadership and technical experience to some of the most critical institutions in national defense, including the White House, the Pentagon, West Point, and DARPA. Formerly with the Office of the National Cyber Director, he now serves as principal and founder at Full Spectrum Cyber Solutions, advising government and industry leaders on building resilient, secure, and forward-looking cyber strategies in the age of AI. He serves on multiple boards, including Sandia National Laboratories, the Technology Advancement Center, the AI Cyber League, and the Military Cyber Professionals Association. A frequent public speaker, Dr. Ragsdale remains a prolific author and advocate for veterans and their families. So welcome to Tipping Spears, Rags.
Well, Hannah, thank you. And yeah, before we jump in here, I wanted to tell you how much I appreciate the work you're doing with this podcast. And you as I've looked at previous episodes, you have a real knack for drawing out insightful stories and lessons from your guests. And it's a fantastic resource. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be part of this. And also, as I mentioned to you before the call, I really appreciate when I have these opportunities, whether it be podcast interviews, public speaking events. It gives me a chance to kind of look back and reflect. And for me, that's it's a gift, frankly, to be able to look back, see what I've learned, who I've engaged with, what I've been able to do, what I've been able to do in combination with others. So it's really been a great opportunity, kind of walking down memory lane just a little bit. And I also want to point out just the tipping spears analogy. We didn't talk about this, but what a great analogy. When you think about the period of time, whether it was 300 or 500,000 years ago, when prehumans or our human ancestors decided to put a tip on a spear, it changed everything. It was a disruptive technology. And really that analogy holds to the present day. If we look at what transpired in the context of these early humans putting a stone tip on a spear, it changed everything in terms of how it was completely disruptive. It changed the way they hunted. And frankly, it changed the way that humans interacted. It changed the way that not only that they hunted, but as you know, it was really maybe an early dual use technology where it was used for providing food for the community, but at the same time, it provided the means to deter violence. So stone-tipped spears can be used as weapons, as we know. And that would be a powerful deterrent to others. So, and admittedly, they could be used for offensive purposes. But the analogy to the present day, as we look at these disruptive technologies we might ask the question, why do we need a strong Department of Defense? Is it to wage wars and have exchanges of hypersonic missiles? No, that's not really why the Department of Defense exists. It's to provide an integrated deterrent to those who would work against our national interests. So the dual use of tip spears, the disruptive nature of that, the way that it in fact changed everything is really a great analogy. So before we jumped in, I wanted to just point out that your choice of that name and that analogy, I think, is very fitting, and it makes sense in the context of what you're trying to do.
Well, thank you, Rags. I need you to be my podcast publicist. That's a great description. It's perfect analogy. Kind of dual use technologies. It changed lives. It changed really the course of humankind.
Change social structures, the way that we cooperate as human agents and groups, the way that we compete, and even the way that we engage in conflict. in ways that I think very radically shaped human development. And I think we're seeing some of those radically shaping disruptive technologies in the present day.
Well, I'm super excited to have you on the podcast because your 40 plus years of service to our nation has put you on the front lines of lots of disruptive things, new technologies, new ways of weaponizing things and new developments and how they impact people all over the globe. So I am super excited to ask you my all-time favorite question on the podcast, which is, where does your story begin?
Okay, so I was born in our nation's capital, penniless and unclothed, as I say. I was actually the seventh of 8 kids into a military family. So if you're familiar with some of the research on birth order, from an early age, I look for ways to stand out in this crowded family. I mean, that is very much a part of my nature and my character, being raised in that circumstance. And just as a frame of reference, so you get, when I was born, Eisenhower was the president. Old Glory, our beautiful flag, had 48 stars on it, and the credit card had not even been invented yet. So you're dealing with a true dinosaur. And just I did some research on this. So I'm captivated by Moore's law that continues to work. They say it's going to break, but it continues to work, right? And I said, well, what about this? What about this phone right here? Pixel 9. How big would that have had to have been using 1958 technology? And the generative AI machine told me it would require a structure with the volume equivalent to 6 Empire State Buildings, or if you can imagine, 400 football fields laid out 10 feet high. So we have come a long way, and I am a dinosaur. That's the big takeaway. Also, want to, if you could just very quickly imagine in your mind's eye, I was the nerdiest and dorkiest and most awkward of 70s high schooler you could even imagine. So you have the mental image? Well, that was me. So think of a young punk with too much hair, wearing plaid polyester double knit slacks and white platform shoes and a pocket slide rule. You say, well, what about a khaki? They weren't even out there yet, right? So that was the kid I was at that time. And where did I come from? I was effectively rudderless. I had no purpose, no direction. I didn't know what I wanted to do in my life. And like a lot of folks, even in the present day, I was just trying to get through the day. I mean, that's where I was. But I am extraordinarily thankful that I've had amazing and blessed, frankly. There were some amazing people that came in my life, and without them, I don't know where I would be today. And so, one that comes immediately to mind, my beautiful high school sweetheart, my soulmate, my wife, my bride, 42 years. She saw something in that dorky, tongue-tied nerdball. Somehow, some way, she saw something I didn't see. And I want to call out to my sister. So, 8 kids, 7 siblings. And in a situation like that, it's very typical for an older sibling to be more like a mentor or even a surrogate parent. And my sister, Pat, I just want to just publicly acknowledge, they both, Cindy certainly throughout her life, my sister certainly from an early age, they cared about me and they nurtured me and they helped me to grow. And I really could not imagine where I would be without those two. Now, if I'm not mistaken, we're probably going to talk about some catalyzing events, and we just wanted to lead in with that's what helped make me who I am, and informs much of the decisions I've made throughout the rest of my life.
It's fascinating to hear, your growth as a person through these multiple kind of technology revolutions, and how, you can hold the phone up now, that can fit in your pocket. but the scale of what that would require, 40 plus years ago, the magnitude of it. And to think that, you've experienced a society that saw such rapid revolution and development. I think it's as I've, learned about your career and all your work, it makes so much sense to hear that you were such a kind of a student of the world and observing these rapid periods of development around you and how that kind of infused your career. So I'm super excited to kind of hear if there was, a particular event or person that really catalyzed your career and gave you some direction or drive, towards a specific target there.
Yeah. So I'm smiling because I really can't tell you how joyful I am I'm gonna name off a couple, three people. I've already talked about my sister and my beautiful bride, but there was a nun when I was in the 6th grade who said, Mr. Ragsdale, after instead of going to recess, I need to see you in my office. And I think, well, what is this about? And she sat me down and she said, listen, I know that you can do better. And I insist that you do better. And I'm going to be on you until I see you performing and doing better. Now, for whatever reason, I took that to heart. And I was making D's. Now imagine being in the 6th grade making D's. I mean, this is not even a thing. I like I said, right on this, didn't care. Didn't really have a desire to learn. Didn't see the reason or the purpose. I was just going through just getting through the day. Well, I will tell you from that moment on, through high school, because of her influence, it was a life-changing conversation. I made straight A's. Now, I wish I could say, because I fell in love with learning and, and through learning, good things happen. No, it was just, I discovered I was able to do so. And she believed in me and she challenged me. So I did it. And then, of course, there was some reinforcement in the home front, like, oh, well, you were making good grades. This is good. So that reinforcement from many others caused me to work harder and to do more. And as a side effect, but not as the goal, to learn more. So I'm forever indebted to Sister Mary. I actually had some great subsequent educators, dozens of them. But I got to call out Mr. Fisk, my high school physics teacher, that once again, he believed in me, he encouraged me, he challenged me, and he demanded that I do better. And straight into West Point. And I was so blessed to be able to get accepted into West Point. There was 2 captains, a Captain Barney Forsyth and a Captain Ken Grice. Both of them were professors, one for psychology, one for physics. And in both cases, they challenged me, they believed in me, they demanded I do better, and I'm forever indebted to them. Now, interestingly enough, both Captain Barney Forsyth and Captain Ken Grice were later promoted through the ranks to the rank of colonel. They retired as colonels, as did I. They were both vice deans at one point at the United States Military Academy at West Point. I too was a vice dean.
Oh, that is funny.
So my role model, I was Cadet Ragsdale was Captain Forsyth. When he left, I moved into his office as a vice dean. So it's just kind of a cool connective tissue to things and again, so thankful to all of these people and more. Now remember I was in uniform for 34 years. Mm-hmm. So imagine all the great leaders I've come in contact with. I mean, I could not even put them on one sheet of paper. Mm-hmm. But I want to call out one in particular. A guy named Colonel Keith Nightingale, who was my battalion commander. So I'm in the 82nd Airborne Division. And I feel like, I know my stuff. I know what to do here. My first encounter with him, he came out to a training site where I was a mortar platoon leader. We're firing mortars, and I couldn't be more proud of the precision that we were demonstrating and the degree to which we were meeting our standards and goals. But he had a different set of standards in mind. He wanted everything we did in attack of art to be tactical. And his first words to me as he's approaching me, and where there's literally steam coming out of his ears, and by literally, I mean figuratively, I could tell he was pissed. And he said, "Lieutenant Ragsdale, what is this, a supermarket parking lot?" And I'm like, no, sir, no. And I was really ready to just show him how good we were. He wanted us to be tactical, camouflage, dug in like we would be fighting our wartime mission. And he believed in standards. He says, without standards, we're going to get the men and women that are assigned to our command, we're going to send them back in body bags. This is the way he talked. And I'm like, okay. And I'm here to tell you, life-changing event for me. It caused me to take what I did much more seriously. And this notion of focusing on standards and not accepting substandard contributions, he basically demanded excellence. And he had an expression, perfect is good enough. And I actually think you could take that too far, because sometimes good enough is good enough. But he really helped me appreciate the importance of having standards for yourself and having standards for your team, because in the absence of standards, you're not going to get to where you need to get. So just summing up, my sister, my bride, Sister Mary, Mr. Fisk, Captains Forsyth and Grice, and at that time, Lieutenant Colonel Nightingale, retired also as a Colonel Nightingale. They all challenged me. They believed in me. They saw things in me I didn't see in myself. And here's the important piece that I want to foot stomp this. They all ultimately, notwithstanding I've characterized Colonel Nightingale as this rough, gruff guy, at the end of the day, he was positive, he was upbeat, and he was realistically optimistic. So think of all the people that we've encountered. I mean, just for a minute, if you would, right, Hannah, that have made the world a better place, that have led well. If you bring them to mind, very few of them are the Debbie Downers of the world. Very few of them are dour, but nearly to a man and a woman, at least in my professional and many years of experience, they are positive, they are upbeat, they're realistically optimistic. They're not toxically optimistic. No one wants a Pollyanna, right? But in every case, they had the faith that we're going to prevail in the end. And they did not confuse that with dealing with the challenges of the present day. So thankful to all of them. They made all the difference in my life. Each of them created a kind of an elbow in the trajectory of my life, and helped me frankly become the man that I am today.
What's fascinating to hear about the different influences, the influential people in your life who, a colonel, an officer at West Point, a nun, wildly at the surface, wildly different, backgrounds and roles. But one thing that just kind of kept coming through as you're talking, these are people who cared about your future and, took the time to make you care about your future too, in a way that you could then contribute to the future of others. And I think that is just such a beautiful journey, and then a story, how they all connect and the influences that they had in your life.
So hearing you reflect that back to me is getting me choked up. So we just need we need to move on. I can't begin to tell you how grateful I am for all of them and the positiveness that they've had in my life.
Bragg, so what first sparked your interest in emerging technologies?
So again, I'm laughing because, my early life, not much of a role model. I told you I was kind of rudderless. And so you heard that I got through the 6th grade, really not paying much attention to school. Then I'm paying attention to school, but really my motivation was just to stay out of trouble and to get some positive regard. It was really not about the learning. And so I wasn't even really thinking about college. Wasn't thinking about the future. And I'm playing golf with my dad before my senior year. So rising senior, I guess you call him. And he turns to me unprompted and says, "Hey, son, if you want me to pay for your education, your two choices are University of Connecticut or Texas A&M. And I said, okay. And I mean, really, I said, Dad, because I hadn't really even thought about it. And he
Yeah.
felt like perhaps maybe I should. And the long story, we won't go into the details of why we had tuition benefits because he was a professor in Connecticut. And as I found out many years later, he wanted me to go to A&M because he always wanted to go to A&M. I didn't even ask at the time. I just said, okay, because I didn't really have a frame of reference. I didn't really think about what I wanted to do when I grew up, so to speak. So, and he said, oh, by the way, you're going to study computer science.
Wow.
And I said, okay. I mean, I wish I could say, well, I was always my dream from early on that I should study computer science, should pursue the computing sciences and be able to self. And no, it was not like that at all. And so, as it turns out, though, I did discover that I had an innate ability to do computing sciences and technologies of that ilk and perform respectively in the classroom. My grades were not as good in college as they were through high school, but I had a competent scholarly record. And again, still not as focused on the learning. I have to be completely honest. It was just a means to an end. I'm a computer science major at Texas A&M for a year, and then at West Point, I was a concentrator in computer science. And I will tell you, I did note that some of my colleagues that were pursuing other disciplines didn't seem to have to study or work as hard as I did, as it turns out. But got through, but I'm not going to claim a deep interest. At that time, was very focused on being an Army officer.
Yeah.
I wanted to serve. I was commissioned infantry. I want to serve in infantry units. I want to be at the pointy tip of the spear. Back to your analogy. That's what I wanted. That's how I'm going to self-actualize. Because when I went to A&M, I remember I was running. Why did I even end up in the military at all? For the want of a dorm room. So I decided, I'm going to Texas A&M. I got accepted to both. I'm going to Texas A&M. And they said, I got a letter saying no dorm for you. And I'm like, well, this is not good. I don't have a car. I'm coming thousands of miles. So I called the housing office or dorm office and said, hey, can you help me out? Here's special circumstances. They said, no, so sorry. No dorm. We're undergoing explosive growth and the enrollment. Sorry. And I said, well, is there anything you could do? And they said, yeah. You could become part of the prestigious Texas A&M Corps of Cadets. And I'm like, ooh, well, that's not what I was interested in. Truly, not one iota of interest. And for the want of a dorm room, I said, okay. and and I would tell you, the first week I was hating life.
Yeah.
Everything I'm like, what have I done? I was homesick. Remember my beautiful high school sweetheart, she's up and going to Boston College now, and I'm down here in Texas. And so somehow over the course of a few months, I fell in love with not the discipline of computer science, but the discipline and what it entails to be part of a military organization. Just fell in love with it. So not because of any desire as a young man to be a military officer, because it was the last thing I wanted to do. Notwithstanding my dad being an officer, I was not interested. So I developed a desire to go down that path. That was my focus and my passion. It was not until years later at the Naval Postgraduate School. So the Army was kind enough I got my bachelor's degree from West Point. I got my master's degree from the Naval Postgraduate School. And ultimately, I was able to come here to Texas A&M. I'm seeing there's some A&M artifacts up in here somewhere to pursue a PhD. And it was at the Naval Postgraduate School where I drank the Kool-Aid. I realized, well, I'm pretty good at this. And the cool thing about many of the engineering disciplines, and certainly computer science, it's a legit meritocracy. Legit meritocracy.
Mhm.
If you do the work, you will reap the benefits. Now, you'd say, well, that's true of anything. Well, not so much. Some of the more creative um, talents, like creative writing, for example,
Mhm.
not necessarily. You could put in all the work and still get a substandard product.
Mhm.
And to me, that's a little off-putting. I did not like the first every half of my West Point class was failing when we went to the term in our first semester English class. And that's a viscerally negative sentiment. Like I don't want to go there too often, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I become a much better writer over time, and we can come back to that later. But the bottom line is, I fell in love with computer science because I was good at it,
Mhm.
and that if I did the work, I would get the benefits. So in that context, I denied myself sleep, I denied myself food, I denied myself creature comforts in order to do the work and to excel because I was good at it and I became one of those students that other students came to for help and assistance and tutoring. And I'm not going to deny that's a powerful incentive. And so that's where I really got the spark. That's where I really got the interest. And that's where I really learned reinforce one of the life lessons I'm going to foot stomp later. And that's, lifelong learning, continuous lifelong learning, using every opportunity to include even this podcast here was an opportunity for me to learn more and grow more and develop more, notwithstanding that, I'm of a certain age, as we've already established, that perhaps maybe it would be a time to put my feet up. I ain't interested in putting my feet up. I want to continue to claw and scratch and learn and grow. I'm enrolled in a postgraduate program at the University of Texas in AI and data science because
Wow.
I advise companies on a variety of technology, a variety of emerging technologies. And and am deeply technical. I've written thousands of lines of code, but I haven't had hands on keyboard for some number of years. So I wanted to make sure, as I advise these small, medium, large companies with respect to how they can adopt these emerging technologies, that I'm not just an empty suit. That in fact
Mhm.
I have built models. I have
Mhm.
dealt with the challenges of large data sets and have use the full panoply of data science technologies that are really disrupting all of our work and all that we do in generally very positive ways.
Well, your commitment to lifelong learning and continuing education is so just sets a great precedence. I feel like, those are the tools that enable, you to kind of merge this legacy of multi-sector work and then solve really complicated problems today. And a lot of times people are just like, well, I got my degree, I'm done. I learned one computer program, I'm done. And it's so encouraging to hear, you know, that you're so passionate about, kind of bringing it all together and tackling these very like wicked problems that everyone else is just like not in my lane. So I really it's very inspiring to kind of hear your take on that.
Yeah,
Given
and my wife often jokes that I can't keep a job,
oh
and what I say to her is like, "Hey, by design."
that is fine.
Because in the context of the work,
Yeah,
if you get comfortable in a job,
yeah,
it's time to turn the page.
that's
It's
true.
time to move on to the next challenge because you're going to have to fake it till you make it. You're going to have to learn. You're going to have to grow. You're going to have to deal with different people and different
Mhm.
circumstances. And in all of that, you're going to be able to do more and you're going to be able to continue to grow.
So on the topic of growth, what personal growth practices or self-improvement habits have remained essential for you across different phases of your career, which span military, government, academia, and private sector? What have you used to kind of keep sharp, keep your tipped spear
Okay,
usable.
that's right. Keep my spear sharp. So when prepping for this, and frankly prepping for many other presentations that are not much different than this, as I look back, I have like literally volumes of content I could share here. I mentioned to you before that I could do a filibuster on this topic and this specific topic about personal growth and leadership. And so with all of that, I'm thinking, well, is there a way, can I crystallize it? Can I pull it into a short, kind of pithy way that perhaps the folks that are, that you could understand, and the folks and really it comes down to really simply this. I have challenged myself, and I challenge others to be bold, to be curious, to be grateful, and to be kind. And when I have found, if I have taken my eye off of those balls and not accounted for the need to do all of those in parallel, then I've not got good outcomes and good results. But when I've been bold, when I've taken that risk, when I've been curious, when I've learned more about something that I thought I would never know about, and when I've been grateful for it all, loving my fate, loving every challenge, every adversity, all the good. It's easy to be grateful for the good, but I'm grateful for the mistakes. I'm grateful for the fails. I'm grateful for the challenges. I'm grateful for the bad bosses, which for me, frankly, was very few. For the colleagues who were more obstacles than they were facilitating the work. I'm grateful for them all. And really, the one I think that I have to continue to remind myself is to be kind. And it sounds like maybe pablum, but if we lose sight of the real need that we have to be kind to one another, then we get off track. We don't realize ultimately good outcomes. And even Al Capone, even Al Capone himself, not the friendliest guy, claimed famously that he was kind to everyone. And he says, don't take that as a sign of weakness, because if you're unkind to me, weakness is the last thing you'll think of. So, those 4 challenges to myself and frankly to anyone, I think just that and that alone will put us in a much better place. And so I do want to highlight this. So over the past 5 decades or so, I'm a technologist, a hard stop, card carrying technologist, but I've been a student of leadership and individual development. So what I'm trying to do as part of this continuous learning is there's both experiential learning, like getting out there doing it. If you want to learn how to be a good leader, be a leader, right? So experiential learning, all those encounters, every interaction I had was an opportunity for me to learn more about how I could be a much more effective leader. But there's also knowledge, right? And so you see this, collection of books, and I'm here to say, not everyone, my learning style is I do good with the books. And that's not for everybody. I'm not saying everybody should become a deep reader, but an influential person they didn't mention before was my college roommate, Jimmy Browning. He read all the time. And I'm like, what are you doing, man? There's life to be lived. But he showed me how much he loved reading, and I have become staying up too late reading books my entire life. So I owe a great debt of gratitude to him. But in what I've been able to do through all that time is to go back through, so to be exposed to the philosopher kings of antiquity, to the great minds of the Enlightenment era, to those scientists and scholars, and up to the present day, the psychologists and the behavioral scientists and the management and leaders experts. I've read deeply and in depth somewhat redundantly, of much of that work. And it's been a profound influence on me. It truly has. And so Newton himself, not a particularly humble guy, and I'm not putting myself in his class, but he once famously said that he could see. People ask, how do you know, he could see as far as he could because he stood on the shoulders of greats. And I want to acknowledge all of these greats that preceded me, that I'm not, the good news is my leadership philosophy, my self-development philosophy is not just cooked up on my own life experience, because that in itself would be inherently limiting. So just wanted to highlight that. So now, more succinctly and more completely and comprehensively to capture the approach I'm taking is I mentioned specifically about the need, the absolute requirement to be bold, curious, grateful, and kind, right? But we're challenged. We are challenged to, and I think that we should all account for this. We are challenged to lead a life that matters. To lead a life where we're making a positive impact, where we're making a contribution to things larger than ourselves. That's a challenge for all of us. And Hannah, have you ever seen Jeff Goldblum do quoting George Bernard Shaw?
No, I'm gonna have
Oh,
to look
it's
this up.
Googleable. He was on one of the late night shows, and he said, let me tell you what drives me. And it was George Bernard Shaw, and I will have this committed to memory. Actually, I'm looking here; I can see it in front of me. So just acknowledging that. So this is the true joy in life: being used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one, being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole of community. As long as I live, it is my privilege to do for it what I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It's sort of a splendid torch, which I hold for the moment, and I want it to burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. Now, that is a great challenge to us all. And I credit Jeff Goldblum and, of course, George Bernard Shaw, who stated those words. And I'm telling you, that was an impactful event in my life, just witnessing Jeff Goldblum quoting George Bernard Shaw, because I think in some respects, it tries to capture the challenge I give to my own self and that I would encourage others to give to themselves. And I think if we all did that, if we all were able to do that, and all our failings and shortcomings, I'm certain the world would be a better place.
Mhm. Those are wise words, Rags. I love the Bernard Shaw, section that you provided. I'm gonna save that one. It's such guidance in a world where people tend to focus on what can I consume, what makes me happy now. No one's making me happy now. Something needs to change. And it's just such a great reminder that we have an obligation and a responsibility, to others, which personal development is kind of part of that, right? Developing ourselves for that. So as you think about, you've been called to lead many different settings, different, uniforms, whether that's in the White House or in uniform in the Pentagon or West Point, or in war zones. What leadership principles have remained constant throughout your 45-year career? Has your leader philosophy evolved? Do you have some foundational truths that you go back to? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, if I could. So Absolutely, my leadership philosophy has evolved radically, and I said I was a student of leadership throughout my life. And you almost have to be when you put on a uniform and you're
Mhm.
put in leadership positions. It's like it's an obligation to learn as much as you can, so that you can be as effective as you can because of the frankly the critical importance of the mission, right?
Mhm.
So I in sort of basic leadership 101. I mean, when we think of the great leaders that you've known, and that others may have known, and basically great leaders in the simplest of terms, they get stuff done, right? They accomplish the mission, right? The organization has some goals and missions, and good leaders ensure that those missions are accomplished. But the thing I learned early on is that in and of itself is not enough. That's to be a good leader, one must accomplish the mission.
Mm.
But that's necessary but not sufficient. The Army's definition of leadership is frankly this. A leadership is a process whereby an individual influences others to accomplish the organizational goal by providing purpose, direction, and motivation. And here's a clause that's often forgotten about and is so critically essential and important while improving the organization. And it's that balance that needs to be struck at all times because there's so many examples of leaders that got the thing done, but in doing so, they tore down and destroyed the organization.
Yeah.
That they got it done. Well, they got the mission done today, but not subsequently. And really, most of those failing relate to the workforce, the people they're called upon to lead. So the best way to engender an improved organization while accomplishing the mission is to improve the and help those that you're called upon to lead acquire new knowledge, new skills, presenting them challenges that will allow them to grow because the best leaders, the very best leaders, leave an organization better than the way they found it. But more importantly, they do that, or most importantly, they do that by leaving behind a team that can perform the mission and function without that leader. So made him or herself irrelevant in that is the truly great leader. So that Army definition of leadership, I've held on to that from Jump Street. Do the mission, improve the organization, take care of the people. But over time, the mission part, we have to be problem solvers. We have to have competencies to do so. We've got to be able to manage resources. That part's almost intuitive. And there are those that do it well and those that don't. And of course, there's knowledge and experience that will help you do that better. But the caring for those that you're called upon to lead, to helping them grow and develop, that for me was something that I certainly evolved over time. I didn't never fully appreciated how much every individual simply wants to be felt heard, to be felt, to be valued, and to be validated whenever possible. Now, some people have a challenge with this, like, well, what if they're underperforming? What if they're underperforming? You can't just. It's not about just giving out cookies to everybody and sunbeams, rainbows, and unicorns. And they're absolutely right. It's not. The challenge, and to me, this is one of the things that always comes to mind, in and particularly in the context of challenging some colleagues, is to look for ways to catch them doing right. So we are pre-programmed to catch people doing wrong. And why? Well, because they're not us, right? By definition, they're going to do things differently, and somewhat by definition, that means you're doing them wrong, right? I mean, or at least that's what comes to mind, right? But if we bend over backwards and we have a bias, we have an action bias, but we have a bias also to catch them doing right. And it happens. You know, I joke sometimes that a broken clock is right 2 times a day, right? And it is so true. It is so true. I could give you chapter and verse on people that I've had the opportunity to work with that were underperforming. But we and others found ways to catch them doing right, and they became re-engaged. Now, does that mean it work in every case? Absolutely not. Sometimes you're not going to get there. But that's a small number. That's a small number. And so for me, the evolution of my leadership philosophy is to be focused more on being empathetic, being compassionate, understanding people, understanding perhaps their competing goals. So remember, the leader accomplishes the organization goals. Well, each of the individuals that are in that organization has their own goals. And so you could say, well, they're competing. Well, no. In fact, many of those goals, particularly if you understand the goals of those you work with, you can frame and put in the context of the goals that they're trying to achieve, the goals of the organization, and give them challenges and opportunities that will help them grow towards both contributing to the organization mission, but also allowing them to achieve their own ends and their own goals. So that question, that common question in interviews, like, where do you want to be in 5 years, right? That's a great question. And everyone should ask everyone they work with particularly if they're in a leadership role, what they are. Because then it gives you a vehicle through which to align the goals of the organization with the goals of the individuals in ways that will help them grow, will actually help them to contribute more to the organization mission. So it requires empathy, it requires, social awareness, it requires adaptability. We've got to have a praise bias. And praise, not flattery. So praise is genuine praise, like legit. Flattery is shallow and is self-serving. It has to be, so you really have to work at this. And, this also relates to both the Dalai Lama and a t-shirt that I wear to the gym when I work out from time to time. And so the Dalai Lama said, be kind whenever possible. It's always possible, right? And the shirt I wear to the gym on the front says, be kind. On the reverse side, it says, everyone is fighting a battle that we probably know nothing about, right? So, we should have a kindness bias. And remember Nightingale? Remember Nightingale? That I didn't perceive that as particularly kind, but frankly, he did care about me. He cared about the future me. You see that? So he was not using kind words, but ultimately he was doing the best thing for me, and it was. He was doing the best thing for the organization, and it was. So he actually cared about me. He demonstrated caring about me and my future, and it made the difference. And for that, I'm forever in his debt. As catching people doing right, this is a hack that I would encourage anyone that is out there that challenged to do so, and to have genuine empathy. Yeah, you can't fake this. You cannot mail it in, right? You just can't. It is, the posers are obvious. It's like, okay, let's sit down. So tell me about the family. And it really has to come from within. It has to come from with a genuine, authentic concern and care for the growth and development and well-being, if you will, of those that you work with. And we all have had people that we work with that have underperformed. But if we were to take to heart some of what I'm saying and encourage them also through our example to be bold, to be curious, to be a lifelong learner, to be grateful, and to be kind, then that in and of itself will contribute to them, I believe, being a much more effective employee, but also leading a more rich and fulfilling life. And I haven't really foot stomped the whole bold part. And so I will just now, just to make sure that it's certainly the curious and grateful and kind part. I think I've made that point. But life is a contact sport, and and be thankful for the challenge. Be thankful for the adversity. Seek the adversity. Seek deliberate discomfort. And does that mean go out and suffer all the time? No. But it is only through challenge, adversity, that we learn and grow and develop. So my kids have heard this. So the couch is where dreams go to die. So my challenge is always get off the couch, get out there and live this life, live it 200%, and be bold and risk greatly, because in great risk there is great reward. And if you fail, then it's not a fail if you learn from it. So that in some respects captures the evolution of my leadership style over time. And I've had successes and I've had some epic fails. I want to make sure that's clear. But in those failures, frankly, I've spent a great deal of time looking back at, I could have done better. I could have done better. I could have created a circumstance where this person could have succeeded, and I was unable to do so.
I love your emphasis on the human component of, progress here. So in your amazing leadership philosophy, you're not mentioning, bottom line goals, you're not mentioning tech tools. And I was reminded as you were kind of explaining this approach, when a few years ago, I worked on a research project looking at digital transformation efforts, and it was the buzzword. You were on the forefront of that. Everyone's talking digital transformation, modernization, and it wasn't always working, right? They get a software program, it's not always working. And it turns out one of the biggest holdups, Rags, was the people. Folks leading these initiatives were not thinking about the end users. They weren't thinking about the customers or, the citizens. If it's public sector, they're just like, tech, go, roll it out. No thoughts to people. And as you were speaking and kind of, I just was really, what impressed upon me was, every element of your leadership philosophy is bringing it back to the humans. And so I was interested kind of as you think about, applying leadership, leading in a technology space, what skills or mindsets do you think are, really essential for folks that want to succeed in the emerging technology sector? Let's say they've been inspired, they want to follow your footsteps in this amazing sector of technology. What skills and mindsets do you think, are essentials they've got to have?
Yeah, so I'm again smiling with the question because some of my most fulfilling moments have been in the classroom, and I get these kind of questions from students often, and others for that matter. And so it would specifically in the technology realm, I've already addressed some of this, but so continuous learning is like a hard stop. That is essential. I mean, you will be left behind if you are not, honing your skills on a regular basis, even if that requires you to work after hours. But frankly, as leaders, provide opportunities for people to acquire those skills in the workplace during the workday. But continuous learning. And one of the things we talked about at West Point, during my time there, certainly as a vice dean, is that we want to contribute to the development of agile and adaptive, critical thinking, effective problem solving leaders of character. Now it's a lot of words to unpack, but you got the agile and adaptive part, check. But it's just being a problem solver, being able to engage in comprehensive critical thinking is so valued in the workplace. in all settings. So acquiring those skills and having an action bias and a mindset that problems can be solved, and an open mind to look for perhaps solutions that could bring some innovation to bear. So those kind of skills. And then there's this notion of we talked about a lot in my last job in the White House for the workforce, that they need to have digital literacy and computational literacy. Now, increasingly, let's just be honest, we haven't talked in depth about technology, but AI, generative AI, not a threat to anyone's job unless they're not willing to lean in and adopt the capabilities that it could provide us and could afford us in super enabling us in the context of it doing our job in a more productive manner. So you heard what I said. There will be a disruption in jobs in the workforce, but everyone who embraces these emerging technologies and uses them to the extent that they possibly can. Does it mean we all got to be hard time coders? No, but there's capabilities that are now availing themselves, certainly agentic AI. And if anybody's not familiar with that term, well, you need to lean in and be cognizant that the ground is moving beneath our feet. Maybe not literally, but certainly figuratively. So having some literacy and computational literacy, because in the context of deploying agents to support your work, in many respects, there's a really interesting school of thought that says when you specify what an agent should do, you should be specified in a way if you were hiring somebody to do that task, which is really interesting in and of itself. But the computational literacy, the way in which to solve things in a computational, and some would say mathematical fashion, is you could bring those skills to bear in designing networks of agents that are AI enabled, that can support and facilitate your workflows, make you more productive, super enable you to be able to do your job better and faster. And so those are some things that certainly in terms of skills, in terms of mindset, just foot stomping growth mindset. I mean, this is a recurring theme through the last hour or so. And of that, certainly curiosity, as I've said, you must be bold and you must be curious. And to experiment in every interaction. Every interaction, frankly, is an opportunity to learn. Every single one of them. And if you look at it with that bias and you have a background process that's trying to learn what you can when things work out, but most importantly, when they don't work out, so as to not perhaps repeat the same mistakes time and time again. And, mindset of resilience, there's a lot of challenge out there. If you cannot be stoic in the presence of all of the change and the stresses of the current day, you will be held back. And this notion of having being resilient in the presence of an emotional state. So I've recent years have become captivated with Marcus Aurelius meditations.
Familiar with it.
I'm sorry?
I'm familiar with it. Yeah.
Okay. So I used to reject Stoicism, actually formally rejected it, first of all, because the original gangster Stoics, they had some strange ideas. But Marcus Aurelius, who was really more of an emperor than a philosopher, and he was writing things down for himself, never for publication, was more of a regular guy, if you will. And so he took Stoicism, and I think he brought it to where it needed to be in terms of influencing all of us. And basically, we have the ability, we can't control the world. There's so much we can't control, out of our control. But we can control our response. And we can control our emotions. When I first, another reason, so I didn't like Stoicism because crazy ideas in part, but also like, wait a minute, I think emotions are good. Joy is good. Happiness is good. Enthusiasm. These are all the, you probably tell that I'm invested in, and that there is an emotional element. It's a part of who we are. Well, what Stoics do, they don't deny their emotions. They don't discount their emotions, but they do control their emotions. And if you did you see the Masters? Did you see the conclusion of the Masters?
Yeah.
So McElroy, did you see it? Okay, amazing stoicism. So here he is looking over a putt that if he sinks it, years of frustration trying to get that fourth crown jewel in the Grand Slam, and it was really just a dark stain on his celebrated career. And he's standing over that pump. You have to imagine the emotions that he must be feeling. His wife and his beautiful kids are there, and the world, the eyes of the world are on him. I cannot imagine the emotional turmoil he must have been feeling. But he had the presence of mind to control that emotion until he sunk that putt. And then he allowed himself to feel the great joy. So this is like case study in stoicism in a way that we should all embrace stoicism. Don't be controlled by our emotions, but control our response to the circumstances of the world, which are often going to be disappointing and tragic and problematic. But then you feel the emotions in a way that are consistent with our worldview. And so I'm literally getting choked up thinking about him, and it's in golf. Like, what do we even care? It's just golf. But it was such a great achievement for him, and it was such a great example, right? Of how one can, and I've seen, go back to leadership real quick, if we could. I know we're already transitioned, but I've been around leaders that have dealt with crises without, and we got this. And I wish every leader that doesn't handle things well could see themselves and how they're actually hurting the team with their visceral negative emotional response to the circumstance, come running back into the office, and we've all seen it, and they're kicking the dog, if there was a dog, or kicking the door. And they tear down organizations. But those that are able to deal with the crisis, they put everybody at ease, and then you can get through the day. So another, mindset for even in the emerging, there's going to be crisis, going to be deadlines, there's going to be fails, but those that can deal with it in a stoic manner, more Marcus, who really is stoicism versus some of the early Stoics and what they said and did. And then, open-mindedness. There's it's a technical term in the, for solution spaces, relaxing constraints. People come in with preconceived notions, well, you can't do that and that and that and that. And then there's literally no solution with those constraints. And your only opportunity then is to recast the problem or relax the constraints. And it's those that can relax the constraints, can actually are comfortable with some ambiguity and some uncertainty, are going to be much more effective as technology leaders.
Well, I really appreciate your integration of emotions and how leaders should, manage, starting with themselves, their reaction to things with emerging technology. Because I think all too often, especially in industry, folks want to disconnect the two, right? What makes us human from the tools we are using, the tech we're developing. And I love how you see those two things as having to go together to succeed. So
Yeah.
Well, I know, so much of the conversation around AI is everyone's freaked about it, right? You mentioned like going to replace our jobs. This is scary. A lot of concern. I wanted to kind of get your take on what new developments, around AI, cybersecurity, cyber operations. what excites you? You are not someone who is freaked over AI. You are excited for the challenge. And I would love to hear your take on what it is that excites you about these new technologies and, how that, what our audience can take from that instead of which you've already provided so much great framework for, instead of just being scared of, oh, the robots are going to take our jobs, how they can prepare themselves for this new development, new experience in society. But what new developments around those topics really excites you the most?
Yeah, so just to frame it just a little bit more, just like we talked about up front, it's legit dual use. Dual use in this respect, in that it could be used for good and it could be used for evil. It could be used for defense. It could be used for offense. It could be used in commercial settings. It could be used in military settings. So it is multi dimensions of dual use, right? That's number one. I would tell you that the only way to combat AI is with AI. So hard stop. And it doesn't mean we like send out the bots and we go back to work. No, 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 no. They think of just a quick throwaway. Fishing used to be, not good, but could kind of see, no, this doesn't look right. Oh my Lord, there's no grammatical errors. They know a lot about our psychology. They know how we work. They know how we think, and it's very effective, and it's going to continue to be effective. Interestingly, our systems are becoming more secure, not less secure. So malware and exploits, in some respects, are on the downward trend, which is like, wait a minute, that's not so. But what's happening is they're hacking the person, right? So stealing credentials is like, that's game over. It is often, we like to talk about the really cool, deep technical aspects of this exploit and what it required. And frankly, it's very difficult. They're still out there. We still have memory corruption faults, which is a generation old problem. Memory corruption exploits, for example, they exist. So we still do have hackable systems, but more often than not, they're hacking the human. And they're doing so in ways that allow them to get credentials. And if they get credentials, they don't have to break in because it's effectively they stole your keys, right? And I don't mean cryptographic keys. I mean the keys to your house is so we've got there's that issue certainly. So am I excited? Oh, hell yes. In a couple ways. One, the United States of America continues to be the engine of innovation for the world. Now, that is not a foregone conclusion that will be sustained into the future. There's some things going on that have given me concerns, but we are that engine of innovation, and so notwithstanding DeepSeek, which many people are aware of and are concerned about, and it comes from a China-based company. It's still we still are leading the way, and there are those that you're looking for the next winter. I'm a original gangster AI guy, by the way. So I was doing AI back in the 80s. I was assigned to West Point's AI Research Center in 1988.
Wow.
Right. So, and they sent me back to grad school, not to get a degree in computer science. Well, yes, a master's degree, but they wanted me to specialize at that time in artificial intelligence. And to tell you how bad the winter that I lived through with all the rest of those that were in that community and field, in 1999, they changed the name of the center from the AI Center to the Information Technology and Operations Center because AI was dead.
Wow. Wow.
So yeah, the reports of my demise are greatly exaggerated, right? So Mark Twain, somewhere in there. But I saw the winter. I saw the winter happen. And there are those that are claiming, oh, we're going to have another winter. No, no, no. I saw a time when rule-based expert systems was going to change everything. and it didn't. I saw a time when that logic-based programming was going to change everything, and then it didn't. I saw a time when, at that time, artificial neural networks, not deep, but were going to change everything, and then they didn't. So the list can continue and actually natural language understanding. We're going to have natural language understanding systems, and then we didn't, right? And there's only relatively in the last 15 years or so that we've really seen some progress there. So there's a kind of school of thought, well, this is going to bubble, the bubble's going to burst, and and no. We will not go back. There will be some fits and starts. There will be this what they're calling general AI. We're not going to necessarily get there tomorrow, but these tools and capabilities and data analytics at scale that can outstrip human performance in many applications is only going to increase. There's a site called, you're familiar with the term. There's an app for that. Yeah. Well, there's a site that's called there's an AI for that. And it used to, and all it is, so you think of the big players, right? There's big players, Google and OpenAI and Perplexity, and there's some big players, right? So there is, on that site, when it first kicked off, there was a couple hundred people that had built capabilities that were leveraging the generative AI that they didn't do, right? So they're basically building on top of the commercial grade availability of some of that capability. So, and people did this thing and they monetized and it made hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars building on top of that technology. Well, give a rough guess. How many specific capabilities do you think are on that site in the current day? What would you think?
Thousands?
15,000.
Wow.
15,000. And it's exploding. And now with these agent frameworks that are being developed, that people with low coding or no coding can put together some agents that are going to do some really mind-blowing things. And then the challenge will be, how do we take advantage of them to super enable all of us to do what we're doing better? Ironically, this call, I've got my note taker, my AI note taker. So at the end of this call, I'm going to get a full transcript, a summary, any takeaways in terms of like what I just said, if there's a business meeting, what you were going to do, what I'm going to do, and even a follow-up thank you email to you from me, right? So you're thinking, well, I don't know, is that cheating? Well, no, I want to do all of that, but there's not that many hours in a day, right? So is it cheating? Well, no, I'm not going to just send you the email, right? I would craft it and look at it. I'm going to curate it, right? And it's still going to be authentic and genuine because, and I'm going to be empathetic and I'm going to be bold and curious and kind. So I'm really excited. But the people that are working at counter purposes with you and I in this great country are using these capabilities. We have a moral imperative not to sit on the sidelines, right? Not to, back to your tipping spears. If there was a group of people like, no, we're not going there. No, well then you no longer exist.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we have to lean in. And every job, every role is going to be impacted by it in very, frankly, dramatic ways. And we got to adapt to that. And we've got to not feel threatened. Like hard stuff, do not feel threatened. Feel the ability to be super enabled. And if we look at, as a case in point, maybe it's a bad analogy, but the banking industry used to have tens of thousands of tellers. Yes? And now the employment in the banking industry is more, but they have far fewer tellers by virtue of ATMs. So did we have a net job loss? No. In some settings, we may have a net job loss. But if people are open and adaptive, they're going to be able to use the skills they've acquired over their life, super enabled with some of these generative AI capabilities, and make themselves more valuable contributors.
Yeah, It's a great example with banking because as you were talking, my Aunt Irma was a bank teller her entire career in Rags. She was held up at gunpoint like over a dozen times in the middle of nowhere in Mississippi. And it's interesting because, that's a job that's not there anymore, but there are other jobs in banking. And as you're talking, I'm thinking, yeah, so folks that want to work in finance, like my Aunt Irma, now, she's not getting held up at the drive-through window or coming in the bank. So, it's a positive. If she's retired now, but if she was still in, she could cross train and not be in a role where, she's staring down bank robbers. So we don't think about the progress of these things. We
There
just
you
are
go.
like,
There you go. I love that. If I will use that when I use the bank teller analogy. Not only that, but they got full employment and they don't have to deal with bank robbers.
That's right. I know. I love that.
As an ancillary benefit. Yeah, that's too cool.
So I know, in the topic of national security, folks, there's a litany of concerns, and I'm always curious. Folks like yourself, been on the front lines, lots of different contexts, a lot of different, capacities. What are your top concerns about national security? So, like, what keeps you up at night? What are you, worried about? What's a big deal to you related to national security in the U.S.?
It is. So this is easy. So easy. This is not like, oh, there's 12 things. And no, it is this singular topic that keeps you awake at night, literally, too. And that is the degree to which that adversaries of our great country will take actions that will influence U.S. citizens in a way that will cause them to take actions that ultimately are counter purposes with our national interests and are in their national interest. So there's as is well known, the big nation state actors have weaponized all of the platforms in an effort to divide the American people, to push us to the extremes, to put us in camps. And in doing so, united we stand, divided we fall. And I am, to the extent that we could discuss in detail on this medium, I'm limited in some respects, but it is a pervasive, profound, very powerfully influential campaigns by multiple adversaries that will seize just about any issue of the day and dump it into their process and come out with conflicting messaging that will push us to the fringes. Now, that is not healthy for our culture. It's not healthy for our society. And it is what causes me to lie awake at night. And the unfortunate thing is that I believe that we are underestimating the powerful influence. And both individual Americans don't fully appreciate the degree to which their digital exhaust trail creates a data stream that could allow someone to manipulate us in ways that are much more direct and much more impactful than just about anything, because the models are very sophisticated. Through our actions online, we are messaging in a very direct way where our interests lie, what are topics that we'd like to know more about, and telling the world, well, if you want to influence me, I've just told you how to do so. And then, and the beautiful thing about disinformation, for disinformation folks, is it's not like crazy talk. Like, here's this like really like impossible to believe thing. 90% true. Now we got a wedge of disinformation. We overlay it and mix it in. And I maybe appear to be a reputable source. And all of a sudden, you or I or anybody that's being influenced by virtue of these very precise models for each of us that is being used by our adversaries and advertisers, by the way. They're very good. Hey, I'm all about, the market. Let the market work. And if, I'm that part, if there was not a downside to dual use of that influence, like, I get advertisements for things that I'm interested in. And that's, and the free market, this is good. But here's the real challenge in our current state. This is not a First Amendment issue.
Mhm.
Adversaries of our states do not enjoy First Amendment privileges.
Right.
American citizens do. We all do. We should. And across the political spectrum, we embrace the First Amendment.
Mhm.
This is not a First Amendment issue if we can discern that the messaging is coming from non-US sources. And that's actually not that hard to do. I mean, there's numbers of studies done that demonstrate the progeny of where this came from. And it's a bad source. And it's being amplified maybe by good people US persons over here amplifying. But if we get to the root cause, we are not violating First Amendment rights of these people if we try to suppress this disinformation from a non-US source. Now, there's a little bit of a deductive leap there that one need make, but that is the issue of the ages. And we will continue to be polarized as a country increasingly because, and for many reasons, but this is gasoline on that fire.
Yeah.
We don't need any, and we don't need any gasoline. And that more than anything, in all of the, this may surprise you that that's the issue that I would seize upon in the current era, but that has been with us for actually, in some respects, for generations.
Mhm.
Like we've had adversaries that wish to influence public opinion in the United States related to whether or not we get into the First World War or the Second World War or those sorts of things. But now they have the wherewithal, the tools, the capability, super enabled by AI to really pervasively influence individuals or small groups of individuals, pushing them to the extremes and causing them to embrace and consume disinformation that works at counter purposes with our national interests.
Yeah, Rags, as you're talking, I was just thinking, especially on the amplification piece, so many people, good-hearted American citizens, love our country, are not aware that of their actions that are amplifying disinformation. They're not able to distinguish. They're not even aware that our adversaries are intending to manipulate us. And they are just, they think they're doing good. They think they're informing their neighbor. They think they're raising awareness without an understanding of, these are little digital bombs coming from our adversaries,
Yes.
over our borders, and people aren't aware of this. Just so I really appreciate, your foot stomps on that, because there is no big boom, with this kind of attack that we are currently suffering in the information space, which if it just stayed there, if the effects just would stay in the information space, wouldn't that be great? Some intel people could handle that, but instead it impacts civilians in our country. And I think it's just something that so many people are actively engaged on, not aware that they are, every time they get online, sharing something that, isn't valid, or sharing something that has a very pointed approach to it and isn't from, anyone inside our country. And they're just not aware of that role that it has, or the mechanisms around it, trying to really, divide, me from you and us from our neighbors, and eventually, us from our country.
Yeah, 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 and you could see why it's a very cost-effective way.
Mhm.
You mentioned digital bombs. That would be an act of war,
Right?
and that there would be response in kind.
Yeah.
But because it's so underappreciated, across the board, I'm not a tinfoil hat guy on this topic. I'm the enemy is at the gate, and they are, and it's a Trojan horse. It's a
I
Trojan.
like that. That's true.
It's a Trojan horse. A tip in there. So another, so there was a dual use. It absolutely is, because it was a nice gift and everyone was unaware. And in fact, they are in our midst, influencing us in a very, very direct and consequential way. I mean, the studies that have been done are definitive, And to the extent that they're collecting data, the platforms with the Reels and the TikTok, there's no more effective way to get somebody's interests
Yeah.
than one of those platforms. Because, and I'll be the first to admit, I send Instagram Reels. It's my love language with my bride. I I do. We both do. We exchange Instagram Reels all the time. Because and they're like about dogs and puppies and how much I love her and all of that, right? And but one thing I do like about my feed is that it kind of is a reflection of who I am, which I kind of like. Oh, okay, I like my feed, right? Because it is. I do like dogs and puppies and family and babies and kids and all that romantical stuff. So, but it's doing a really good job. It knows me. It knows me, and they're not owned by an adversary of our state. So I have, there's a specific platform that I really have issues with. Like, we're right. We should stop. But I'm also cognizant that in my own, I could disconnect immediately, completely. My firstborn son is trying to do so. He has a flip phone, like old school flip phone, not the new fancy ones that are just smartphones with it, But I am cognizant that that we all need to be cautious on the messaging that we're doing, because, Instagram, I'm not worried about the control of that data, but it is hackable. And Instagram, like Facebook and some of the other platforms, does at times sell their data, your data, our data. And, adversaries can gain access to it that way, not directly, which they might do with other platforms. So, something for us to all bear in mind, to the extent that we could retain some degree of anonymity in platforms. I'm a big fan of end-to-end encryption. Notwithstanding the hullabaloo of late, I'm a frequent Signal user. I use Signal all the time because I appreciate the end-to-end encryption. So there, we kind of, worked this issue in depth but I think we need more work. We got to do more. We need technologies. We need the platforms to be accountable. And I think we're relaxing accountability, which is problematic in my mind. Like they should be ferreting out disinformation, and they should be calling it out, and they should make it more difficult, because we need them. They can monetize hate, they can monetize disinformation, they certainly can. But perhaps there's a role for governments across the international spectrum to put some constraints, not to choke out the market, but to protect those that may be unduly influenced. We certainly are, I think, doing a pretty good job with children, making sure that children are not targeted and are not exposed to content they shouldn't. But really, I worry almost as much for full-grown adults who can make their own decisions with respect to some of this content that they may be unwittingly amplifying without ever knowing.
That's great words of kind of bringing awareness to it, because I think so many people are not aware. They're not aware at their role at essentially, giving intel to our enemies that could be used to harm us, right? I mean, I'm right there with you on the funny dog videos on Instagram,
Yeah. Yeah.
So how has technology reshaped the way we approach security and defense?
So I hate to keep coming back to the AI thing, but it's really so increased connectivity, certainly,
Mhm.
right? Um, and Moore's law. So we push bandwidth, to the edge, right? And increasingly to the real pointy tip of the spear. Like, God forbid we're ever engaged in a conflict in theaters remote from where we are. And frankly, we are already. So at one point I was going to discuss the things that I was most proud of professionally. And I'm going to, I think, foot stomp this. The one thing I'm most proud of, maybe on a personal basis, is that I got three great kids. My wife and I were blessed with three wonderful, life forms. They all have served or are serving one in the Army, one in the Navy, one in the Air Force. My firstborn son was a cyber operator. His last job was a commander of a JSOC cyber troop.
Yeah.
And just for the record, that meant he was doing cyber door kicking at the behest of the president. So really important, consequential work, a bright, big brained guy. My second son, F-16 pilot, flew missions out of, my firstborn son also did a tour in Afghanistan. Second born son, F-16 pilot, flew 42 missions out of Bagram, where I served in 2022. So it's about almost a 20-year difference between our deployments to Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan. And my daughter tonight is on the USS Harry Truman, which is stationed, as you know, in the Red Sea. And they're out there with a carrier strike group. She's the fleet meteorologist for the fleet. She has the wherewithal to walk into meetings on a regular basis with the lieutenant commander that she is, and turn to admirals and captains and say, "Sir, I would not recommend that." um, and she owns that. I mean, she was raised to be bold and seek adversity and challenge, and she has no problem with speaking the truth about the meteorological conditions that could put at risk what the plans called for. I bring this up in this context, in that that's the thing I'm frankly most proud of, is that they saw their mom, who was also a Department of the Army civilian and did amazing things, and gave up the ability for her to have a full-blown career to support me. But they saw us both self-actualizing in our jobs, loving what we did, making a difference, and they themselves sought similar paths and are continue to contribute in ways that frankly make me just incredibly proud. That said, to your question about how is technology changing things, well, right now in the Red Sea, we're very fortunate to have some very formidable capabilities that are keeping up. Imagine this. We have an adversary that has been trying to shoot at this carrier strike group, which is ensuring navigation. Like, this is a mission for the world, at the behest of the world and the world's economies. We are protecting the shipping lanes through the Red Sea. If we're not there, there is no security in the Red Sea. So this is such important work. But they're also big targets. And notwithstanding the great threat, they have kept that entire carrier strike group safe and secure while performing the mission, getting the job done. They've kept all of those sailors and Marines and pilots safe to the full extent possible. And largely due to some of the information technologies, communication technologies, electronic warfare technologies, and sensing, particularly sensing technologies, some of which we can't discuss here. But we still have a formidable force that is super enabled by the technologies we've been able to field in support of the force and in support of the missions we're trying to achieve and accomplish.
Yeah, well, it's, technologies, the expanding capabilities can help us keep, folks safe, our country safe. And I know we just talked about, the one side of it, the dual use, the weaponization of technology. And then it's so interesting to hear, the safety component and how technology supports that. And I think it kind of goes back, at the beginning of the podcast, you're talking about spears when those came on the market, caveman. And it's like, okay, well, we can use this to hunt. We can use this to hurt people. It's the same tool, right? You're using it so many different ways. And I just love the reminder, because I think so many people feel they see the harm, the weaponization potential, or the weaponization actualization of technology, and they forget about these awesome capabilities and how it supports security and keeps, our folks in uniform and then our country and our allies safer.
Yeah, and I want to come back to, because you often don't hear the word deterrence. We don't hear it enough, because that's really what it's about. If we think of that force, now they have launched strikes, hard stop, launched strikes from those platforms. But for the most part, they have provided security through their presence. They have deterred engagement of commercial shipping, deterred, and in many cases without the necessity to apply force. You see? And to me, that's why I was in the Department of Defense for 41 years. Oh, I did not want to go close with and destroy the adversaries of our country. I wanted to deter our adversaries. Like we have a capability that's so formidable, you will not want to mess with us. And to the extent that we've been able to do so for generations, I think notwithstanding, it's not without some failures along the way, that we have kept the American people safe. We have protected our national interests. We have provided the security that we call upon our military to provide, and without the necessity to frequently apply force, even in the context of Iraq. So I was in Iraq 2005, 2006. We were there as a deterrent force. There was very little force application. The initial charge to Baghdad over the course of 100 days or so, sure, there was some force application. But we were there in part, and frankly, it's true in Afghanistan too, not to apply force, but to deter the application of force. And notwithstanding outcomes as they have resulted over the ensuing years, we're frankly very successful at those missions at those times without applying a great deal of force. So the deterrent effect is really the salient issue that there's a reason why we changed the name in 1947 from the Department of War to the Department of Defense. And that was not for optics. It was because of who we really are. Now, at the same time, they put the Department of Navy with the Department of War, and they created the Department of the Air Force. And so there was a lot going on when that happened. Thank you, Truman. The aircraft carrier my daughter's on, as it turns out. And he also Truman brought some change to our military that was necessary. The desegregation of the military was not a decision made within the military. It was Truman. That was Truman's influence. So we're thankful. Many reforms of the Department of Defense come from external sources, not from within. Perhaps another discussion for another day about some big issues that I think that the department has to get their head around, that perhaps an outside influence would be good and healthy. But that's that's a divergent topic.
No, it's interesting. I knew the name changed from Department of War to Defense, but I did not know the backstory on that and kind of all the other, you know, pivotal, you know, changes that Truman made. I was not aware it came from external source. So you have informed me, right, on some very interesting military history.
I have been a student of some of this. Like, so during my time, I had almost 15 glorious months on the campus. And the Eisenhower Executive Office Building used to be the old Executive Office Building, used to be the State War and Navy Building. They housed 3 executive departments in one building. Could you imagine that today? The Pentagon alone is like,
Wow.
and it was Sherman, General Sherman,
Yeah.
Civil War fame, and who's a big hero of mine, and he's reviled in Georgia in particular. He should not be, because he destroyed infrastructure, did not kill as many people. So he's a hero. There are generations of people that grew up in that part of the country that exist because he destroyed their infrastructure as he burned to the sea, as opposed to bringing the end of life for more of the Confederate soldiers at the time. But it was his idea. He said, hey, we got this, and I'm paraphrasing, obviously. If we take these people that are doing our international relations and policy, we put them in the same building, then good things will happen. Well, they'll talk, and because diplomacy or war is another form of diplomacy, something like that. But if you're looking at influence, the dime, right? You're familiar with that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, right. So you got diplomatic and military, right? Put them together, and it would be a good outcome. You would think. They would bump into each other in the halls, and they would have hallway, like water cooler chats.
Yes.
Guess what the Navy did? They built walls in the hallways to keep those damn State Department people out.
Wow.
And so Congress had to intervene, like, Navy Department, tear down those walls, Actually, Reagan was quoting them later when he,
Yeah, that is so neat. I've been in the Eisenhower building, and it's
Isn't
a
it
labyrinth, but
oh my God. Have you been in the Secretary of War suite?
I have, Rags.
Oh, I would just go, when I was working there, I would go hang out over there. After the call, I'll tell you who's in those offices right now. After the call. Okay.
So that was one of the few literal breathtaking moments of my life, walking into that particular suite. I was like, wow, this is really something. I know.
So Ronald Reagan, thank you, Ronald Reagan, and Howard Baker as chief of staff. They reclaimed that building. The big restoration, Eisenhower, I love Ike, but will never forgive him. He wanted to he's 7 years he was in that building. You're 7 minutes in that building, and it's a grand, needs to be served. 7 years, he's president, said, hey, we need more room for all these federal employees. What do we do? The study came back, they said, well, knock down that building and put up a modern office building, kind of like the new executive office building. You've seen that?
Yes.
That train wreck? Oh, they were going to put that up. They were going to knock it down and put one of those up. And he said, I don't like that, but you got to do what your staff recommends, send it to Congress. And Congress rejected it, thank God, right? Oh. So I'm going to forgive Ike because he did the right thing. You do what right? His last month in office. So he's not going to, he's had 2 terms. He's going to be succeeded by Kennedy. Mm-hmm. And so he says, well, okay, I got this report. He resubmitted the report. Unforgivable. Ike, you had your chance. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on you. So I love Ike. I love everything about Ike, except for he wanted to knock down that building. And thankfully, Congress said no. And then Reagan did the right thing. And, Jackie Kennedy did all the right things with, Jackson Place and the museum there on the corner. And what's the name of where the heads of state stay?
Yeah.
Lee House. She said, keep all of that. And so we owe her a debt of gratitude.
Oh, that is so interesting. I'm going to remember that next time I get a chance to go in there.
Hey, so I will tell you this, if I ever get the opportunity to go back, I was Mr. Tour Guide. Oh yeah, I leaned into it. Bowled in the Truman Bowling Alley in the basement, and West Wing tours. I'm your guy for West Wing tours, but um, but right now I currently don't have a role and actually there's no West Wing tours going on now. I don't believe. Just for the record,
So what do you think our society or the next generation is lacking in terms of being positioned to succeed, in this field? I know you've talked a lot about, critical elements of personal development, critical elements of leadership. But what do you think folks are lacking in terms of, kind of encountering a world that has lots of, complex threats coming at us, many facilitated by tech?
So really it comes down to this. I think the greatest threat to and it's a legit national security threat, is that we don't have enough students that are pursuing studies in areas where we need them to pursue studies.
Yeah.
So, there's been for decades a push for more STEM, right? And I got to be careful when I foot stomp this, because in some respects, I'm not denigrating the humanities or the importance and the value. Frankly, I am, but what I am doing is I'm embracing, for example, the world standard for engineering disciplines is ABET, right? ABET, an acronym that doesn't even mean anything anymore. They're one of these like, IBM, it doesn't really stand for International Business Machine. 3M does not mean Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing. It's 3M. Even Texas A&M is not an acronym.
Agriculture and
Mechanical, but it's not that anymore. No, it was the Agricultural Mechanical College of Texas. And then in the 60s, we're actually a university, so we're going to be Texas A&M University, and the A&M don't mean anything. There, so somehow I got on that path. Oh, so STEM. So, all right, so the E in engineering, ABET accreditation requires a whole lot of those soft skills and management and leadership and being able to write and communicate effectively. So it does not mean study only mathematics and engineering. That's not what an ABET, a STEM major, is doing, because certainly in the engineering disciplines, and even frankly at some of most of our institutions of higher education, even your math majors and your science majors are getting exposed to some of those other areas as part of their degree requirements. So it is not to say when we say, boy, pursue STEM, it means that the other disciplines that are not covered in that rubric or those collection of disciplines are to be denigrated. But we just simply do not have enough STEM-focused students. And compared to the rest of the world, it's like really bad. Certainly, our numbers, and I ran these numbers earlier this week, and I'm doing this a little bit off the top of my head, but we still produce a lot because we're a big country and we have a lot of people that go through school, but there's wholly 4 times as many STEM majors coming out of China, 3 times as many coming out of India, almost a comparable number coming out of Russia, and they're a decreasing population, right? So and even frankly, a country like Indonesia has almost half as many STEM majors as the United States. So we have some work to do, and also, as it turns out, there's not only do we have a smaller number that are pursuing STEM studies, but then in future employment, a much smaller percentage of those who pursue STEM studies are doing STEM professions, right? So we have a smaller, so what that means is we are dependent. We talk about energy independence, right? We are absolutely engineering dependent on other countries.
Wow.
And frankly, they bring such great value. So this is not a, jingoistic, it should only be us. But it does create, particularly in a context where perhaps there are times when we are discouraging students from pursuing studies here or disincentivizing, we can't just assume that magically more students without the proper encouragement and without the perhaps incentives and inducements would be pursuing STEM studies in our colleges and universities, or for example, there's many jobs, that entry-level jobs in particular, where the degrees is not a requirement. So, but even in those cases, there should be more opportunities for them to pursue STEM-related training and STEM-related education to both ensure that we have an adequate and well-trained and well-prepared workforce for those roles, and in part to at least hedge our bets to where we can decrease, but perhaps not eliminate, our current dependence on foreign students coming to study at our universities and frankly to do jobs within our workforce.
Oh, it's very insightful to be aware of kind of the stats on our STEM qualified and capable workforce. I have never heard the description of kind of how the humanities work in to support the STEM degree programs is something I've never heard before in that context. You really described that well, because I think people tend to view when we start talking about, hey, we don't have enough tech majors, we don't have enough engineering majors, mathematicians, they view it as an either or, right? Like, you want the arts folks or you want this, and it's like, no, we've got to have this development. And it's really interesting to hear how the engineering programs, those that were accredited, incorporated those management courses, the soft skills into their curriculum.
Yeah.
I mean,
Hey, and you just something, as I was preparing for this, was like 97 million things I would like to say, but you just touched on there it is, because I got, and I told you I'm talking, I can't shut up. But I will say that the one thing that I've learned that has been so helpful to me is, and I am, it's used in many contexts, but it's basically the assertion that instead of that, you should embrace the genius of the and as opposed to the tyranny of the or.
that.
And it's like, I think of that, that comes to mind all the time, like, ooh,
Yeah.
this is a really hard problem. And more often than not, it's because we have a false dilemma. Like, we paint things, because the world is easy, it's black, it's white, we got to choose A or B. No, we can have A and B, like hard stop, both, like come both of them. Or more often than not, we can have most of A and most of B. And that's like, that has opened up the prospect of solutions to hard problems time and time again for me. And I bring that to mind, like, okay, ooh, this seems like there's friction here. There's a zero-sum game. The world is not a zero-sum game. It is not a zero-sum game. More often than not, there's enough complexity and nuance in every issue that there is some gray. The proverbial win-win. It's out there. Never split the difference. Never split the difference. It's not a zero-sum game. So to your point that you were just making, is that, we can have both. We encourage people to pursue STEM studies in the United States and continue and still have an infusion of highly talented, well-motivated, and capable foreign students that can come and make us even better, right? We can do both. We need to stop the tyranny of the or. It's U.S. persons or foreign students. We need both, and we perhaps, and there's opportunity for reform. There's noteworthy cases, individual U.S. technologies that have been misappropriated, for lack of a better word, due to foreign students that come here to study, and then with an agenda. But for the most part, it is not that. The students are good. They're capable. They're amazing. I've worked with these students. I know this. Um, and so let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's find comprehensive ways to ensure that we're careful and that protected technologies need to be protected. But at the same time, we need to continue to leverage the capability, the wherewithal, the talent that comes to us from foreign sources. So embracing the genius of the and as opposed to the tyranny of the or.
I love that. I love that the saying. I'm gonna jot that one down. I think it's kind of a testament to, to drive innovation, the innovation at the speed that we need for technology developing so quickly. It can't just be you and me in a little bubble, thinking we've got all the answers. It's got to be that collective knowledge, and that collective knowledge comes from a lot of different places.
Yep. And, back to the leadership model. So we've got organizational goals, we have individual goals, and they're not in direct tension. You can achieve organizational goals and achieve the majority of the individual goals in the context of the work that they do in the workplace. So it's to me, it's a really helpful sort of heuristic for how to, we live in a complex world, but let's not make it too simple. That's Einstein. Keep everything simple, but not too simple. Right. Right. Like, oh, so because there it is. It's all gray. It's all gray. It's all gray. So let's find the solution in the gray space. And AI will help us do that.
There you go. So, Rex, looking forward, what developments are you most hopeful for regarding, our future?
I have no hope. No. No, I just had to say that. So I am beyond hopeful. So, I'm one for quotes. So the Stockdale paradox, are you familiar with this?
No, I've got to read about this.
Okay, so Admiral Stockdale was the senior ranking person in the Hanoi Hilton,
Yes.
prisoner of war, 5 years in the Hanoi Hilton. And when you're the leader, they make you the leader. You have to do hard and difficult things representing all the prisoners, and they bring you in. And so they asked him, like, you were able to come through that experience well. And he said, was it because of your optimism? And he said, no. Because, those Pollyannish optimists, I'm paraphrasing now, but I'll give you the actual quote. Those Pollyannish optimists that said, we'll be home by Christmas. And then when we didn't, they didn't flourish. Many of them perished, actually. He said, but, and I am going to paraphrase, but I've reflected on it so many times, I think I've got this. We can never confuse with the belief that we will prevail in the end, which we can never lose, with the necessity to confront the often brutal realities of today. And so that is actually an optimistic outlook, but it's a realistic optimism, right? It's like everything ain't great right now, but ultimately we're going to prevail. You got to believe that, because if you don't believe that, why even bother, right? And it may not even be true, right? But you have to believe it will be true. If you can't believe it's true, then you have no purpose, right? And so, again, really helpful, because, sometimes, the wheels are off. We, bad things happen, and there are dark days ahead, but we believe ultimately that we will prevail in the end. And so I do have hope. I have great hope. I have great hope. I've been very careful not to delve into some of the political comings and goings, and by design. By design, I'm not interested in wading into some of that political controversy, not because I don't care, but because I'm not sure it'd be helpful for me to weigh in on that. But I will say this: we will get through this trial. And we have grave uncertainties, both on the international stage and even domestically, right? There's a lot of uncertainty. But the two things that give me hope are the two specific things. One, it is a part of our national character that we have dealt with challenge and adversity over time, and we ultimately have prevailed. We have a consistent track record of being able to do that. And I have faith that we will continue to do so. But I also believe that there's another part of this. So national security and economic prosperity are interwoven in ways that I don't think are, again, fully appreciated. So we still have a very prosperous land, and we still are the engine of innovation for the world. Is all innovation done in the United States of America? No. Is all innovation done by Americans? No. Is all innovation done by American companies? No. But do we lead? Absolutely. Continue to. Look at where's the AI epicenter today? Silicon Valley, right? Hard stop, right? So, and there's a whole bunch of reasons for that, which we don't have time to actually get into. But in part, it's because of the civil liberties and freedoms that we enjoy. And so it's in part because we have freedoms, but it's also in part that a government has a role. But much like, you've got to find that sweet spot. It's about finding the sweet spot. The government has a role to protect us all from the invisible hand of the market. The invisible hand of the market is cruel. The invisible hand of the market, it would not, if allowed, would allow child labor, would allow for practices that work at counter purposes with our interests. So the government at times intervenes with regulations and laws that protect the people. But in the United States, they've done so with a sufficiently light hand that the market has been able to flourish, bringing both those companies and their employees, raising the tide. Now, this is a very difficult fine-tuning sort of thing, to the extent that, if we're so pro-business, it will be at the expense of our workers and the workforce and the middle class. But on the other hand, if we disadvantage all U.S. companies in a way that allows them that will damage their competitiveness, that in fact would make them less able to prosper, would damage prosperity in the United States, which would, because it's intertwined with national security, would be a national security threat. So it's all connected. And what gives me hope is we still are the engine of innovation. They still beat a path to our doors to our institution of higher education. We still enjoy liberties and freedoms that allow us to prosper as individuals. And we still have, I believe, a policy with respect to the commercial sector from the federal level that is going to allow them to continue to flourish and be competitive with respect to other countries. So that's my current worldview. That where I do have some hope, there are, we're going through some dark times, but we've come through dark times, and we are good people. We are good-hearted people. I think we will get through this.
So encouraging. I appreciate your insights on that, and kind of drawing from your many experiences and seeing multiple different organizations and communities through challenging times.
Yeah. You're very kind. This has been very, very fulfilling to me to be able to spend some time with you.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Rags, for sharing your insights with the audience. Your contributions to our nation have impacted all of us listening here today, and really appreciate your ongoing work in this critical space.
Yeah, and so Michener, one of my authors is up here, did his most impactful work in his 70s.
Really?
Yes, like wrote more books, more highly acclaimed in his 70s. So I'm actually looking forward to that. And as we wrap it up here, I do want to say this. So we've said a lot of things. And so one of my great heroines is Maya Angelou. Mm-hmm. And just such a great, Google her picture, and you will never find she went through adversity, like incredible adversity. And she brought that to bear on all of her life's work through her 6 or 7 autobiographies that all were amazing. But if you Google her picture, you never see one of her without a bright, beautiful smile, and like a glint in her eye, because she brought such joy and passion and style to everything she did. She was just amazing on so many levels. Great poet, great civil rights activist, just amazing. But she said once, hey, people will forget what you say. And people will probably forget most of what we've ever said here, even if they hear it. And you and I will forget most of it. And they will forget what you do. But they'll never forget how you made them feel. And in the context of this interaction, you have given me hope. And I hope to, in some extent, I've given you some hope. And to those that have the opportunity to listen to this, maybe they could feel some more hope. That would be a wonderful outcome. But putting it back in the context of leaders, right? Remember all those interactions with all those people. They're not going to remember what you did. They're not going to remember what you said. They're going to remember how you made them feel. Did they make them feel uplifted? Did you make them feel empowered? Did they make you feel valued? If you did, you're going to be an effective leader.
Those are great words of wisdom there, Rags. It's a good, excellent reminder. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning into this episode of Tipping Spheres with Hannah Becker. We hope this conversation has sparked new ideas and challenged the way you think. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, and we'll catch you next time with another exciting guest.